Great. So today I didn't want to own this meeting so much, so like I've been doing in the past. So I have nothing really relevant to share, and nothing else than I've been writing documentation like crazy, and writing a getting started guide just for people to get started. Especially with the specification, but not entering so much in the tooling side because we don't have the tooling yet. So, so yeah, this is what I've been doing lately. I'm gonna be working on the tooling as well as soon as I have some documentation, and also on the extensions catalog, which is it's gonna be part of it's gonna be a huge part of the version 2. And yeah, that's pretty much what I would like to work on the next weeks. Plus traveling and speaking, which everything starts next week. This is cool, but it's gonna be tiring and fun. So I would like to know more about you, about what are your concerns about. How can I help you collaborate better or contribute better, or if there's anything we can do. So I'm not gonna say we can do it. It's if there's anything I can do for you to help or to get started, and following a little bit the conversation of the last meeting where we mentioned to do some kind of say how do we say that? We mentioned to have some kind of tutorials, or not tutorials, workshops. Sorry, I couldn't find the word. To have some workshops that I can do for you, so you get introduced to the specification and the whole, or the tooling, the existing tooling, not the future one, and the concepts, because some people come from REST APIs, and it's hard to change the mindset to event-driven, and also JSON schema, because schemas in AsyncAPI are based on JSON schema most of the time. It can also be something that stops you from continued working or learning AsyncAPI, right? So as I said, is there anything you want to tell me? Like,
I have an idea.
Yeah.
So I'm delivering a technical workshop with my colleague Uli in Singapore, and I'm going to send it to you. And so it is all, you don't have to install anything local. I'm trying to find the GitHub link. And so the reason why that's helpful is I'm going to be at several different API talks, and I'll mention this, and I'll be able to evangelize AsyncAPI, but I'm going to need this group's support, to do that. And so let me give you the link here. So here's the GitHub link. I'd like to have something like this. It's a hands-on lab as a technical workshop where somehow we could show the capability of AsyncAPI without people having to do anything locally. So this is just kind of conceptually the idea. And so my thought is that way someone like me who's on the road, I'll be at, of course, Singapore API Days next week, starting this Friday. I'll be at the Austin Homegrown API Meetup May 9th. And then at the Nordic API Summit, speaking May 13th through the 15th. Some of you might be there as well. I got invited to the Zurich API Days, but I haven't given them a firm answer. And then Fran, you and I will both be in Finland in June for that one. And then I'm remotely speaking to the Write the Docs chapter for Ottawa, Canada, which is going to be held at the Shopify headquarters, and they're particularly interested in developer experience. And I'd like to talk about async because many people writing documentation, they won't be as familiar with event-driven architectures. And then doing a session for women who code in both the Dallas and Fort Worth chapters, 2 different sections, July, August, on API design. And I'd like to cover how product managers and anyone who's maybe not familiar with the spec can quickly get up to speed so that they can better have conversations with architects and QA folks, as well as what we can talk about at the San Francisco API Days, July 19th. And that's my whole bit, so that I don't take up the whole thing. But I just mentioned I'll be on the road, and there's a lot I can do to talk about and hopefully, educate people.
And what can I do to help you do that?
Sure. So I'd like a hands-on lab, like the GitHub link I just sent in the chat to everyone, where you can spin it up and just show people the capability.
Is it somehow, because I didn't have time to watch the link.
Sure, no worries. Yeah, it's just.
Is it like, for instance, the editor somehow similar, like the online editor we have? Because they play with it, right, and see the documentation live.
Right. So this one is basically, the demo is in a container and it sits on AWS, and you can build a data model and deploy this image, and then it basically shows how you can streamline the workflow. And I'd like to show that with AsyncAPI. So it's just an idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the online editor that we have is not enough to showcase AsyncAPI?
It might be. I can try it, but yeah, I'll talk with you offline as well to get more help.
Okay, yeah, no problem. So
do we have an editor for next version yet, or a proposed editor for next?
No. This is the tooling that we're working.
Okay.
On. So actually, we're working on the parser, so we can work on the generator, which is the one who generates the documentation, and then this will serve the online editor. This chain of dependency, Okay. And that's why we're trying to speed up the parsing. And so, Jonathan, now that you spoke, you want to share something about future plans? Can we share something? Not yet.
On the 2.0.0 concept?
Yes, or in events or anything.
Yeah, sure. So I just want to make sure we're talking about the right thing. So I think right now there's sort of an idea, which I think we're going to do. I know I'm committed to it. Fran seems to be committed to it as well. That we're basically going to do a talk at Gartner AADI in London. I think it's like May 20th through 21st. So I think the idea is to again sort of get the Gartner folks, as well as the kind of the more business-oriented people, to understand sort of what value AsyncAPI really provides, and then sort of start talking, start having a discussion, which I think will lend its way also towards Axway's direction around sort of how AsyncAPI is sort of a foundational piece as to why you need that from an event management perspective. So I think we're going to do, I think it's a 30-minute talk. I'm not 100% sure. It's something I got to figure out today again, but we are a platinum sponsor of Gartner AADI in London, so we have a designated speaking slot anyway. So,
and suggestions on how to improve this working group. Let's say on what do you think, in your opinion, is needed to improve collaboration?
I think the collaboration's fine. I know obviously Rubén has come on to help us speed up the Go generator, the parser, right? But I think one thing that we should start to do is sort of sketch out the, very similar, I think, to what Emmelyn has from a sort of like, this is the steps that you do in order to use the spec. But again, it's kind of one of those things of without sort of, we could do it for the previous version, the previous, not 2.0, but then it is kind of like, well, we just have to redo it when 2.0 comes out, right? So it's like, I feel like I know what we need, which is sort of the step-by-step tutorial of the ways in which you can use AsyncAPI, whether it's you want to document your code or generate your code or like whatever. But I feel like we're in that sort of awkward stage of 2.0.0 is coming out. So where do we put our time? I think that's to me the challenge. And then how do we support Emmelyn and her global world tour? It sounds like she's going to go on and still be able to get the word out, even though we're not quite ready, right? Like, I think that deserves, probably some more discussion.
Yeah, and that's where I need this group's help, right? Because exactly, where do we spend our time? We know everyone wants to learn how to do this, but where do we have them focused to where they could get immediate value and have their R&D adopt the spec? To me, that's the number one goal I want, is for companies, R&D to adopt the spec so that they can come back to us and tell us what they're doing. And second, I'd like to, get more collaborators to come and, be more available than I have been, for example.
Yeah. So I do have a opinion. We'll see what Fran's opinion is that, so like the demo that you showed me, or showed us, right, is obviously like pretty advanced, pretty powerful, using OpenAPI, which has been around for a long enough time that there is supporting tooling, right? I feel like, since this is sort of what we do day in and day out, that I still think that the world has to understand the difference between a synchronous API and an asynchronous API, and then see an example of how that gets modeled in AsyncAPI, which doesn't necessarily mean you have to have the tooling, though that would be optimal. I think you could easily fill conference talks just explaining the pros and cons between the different API styles and how the symmetry that AsyncAPI is providing, supplementing OpenAPI, is really the utopia of what enterprise needs. But that's my perspective, given where we are today.
So I love that idea, Jonathan. I was on a webinar recently where they just covered the difference between OAS 2 and 3. And there was an awesome high-level diagram, and it was, Smart Bear that did this. And I think that's probably what I need to do, is create hey, Fran, I saw the blog post you wrote that covers the same topic. So if it's okay with you, maybe I could take a stab at taking that content and developing it further, and then putting it in the Slack channel and seeing what this group thinks. Am I right, Fran? There was a blog article that you wrote.
Maybe from Jonathan, the one from Jonathan. You mean the rest?
Yeah, it basically says replicating the success. Oh yeah, Jonathan, replicating the success of event-driven. So yes, Jonathan, your blog article.
Yeah. So Fran was a contributor.
Oh, okay, I see. So did both of you write it together?
Yes.
Well, okay. All right. Okay. So I guess the point is, then we build on that, right? So you've got some great foundational content.
Yeah.
And then we build on top of it and say, hey, what's the difference? But then people on the ground, right? So the executives want to know, all right, why should I pay attention to this thing? Why does this matter? And then that's when the banking conversations come in, right? Real-time transactions. How accurate how near to real-time is your business hinging on these APIs versus...
Yeah, and it's a different message for a different group, I think, right? Like in banking, like they already know all about like why they should be, they know probably more than anybody the difference between synchronous and asynchronous interactions and like why they have to be event-driven. What they're missing is how the heck do you document it and really specify out what everything's doing in their ecosystem versus like I see in retail retail seems to be much more locked in a synchronous API world, and they don't yet understand the benefits of why they could be asynchronous. So I think you want to sort of tailor your discussion to both groups, because at any given show, you're going to have both groups in the audience.
Yeah, and so I can help with the parts you mentioned where it's, documentation and ecosystem. And I think in general, companies, depending on their line of business, because I'll give you an example, like Alibaba, they have so many different lines of business, right, in their ecosystem, and each business unit is going to need different levels of, whether or not it should be request response versus asynchronous, and they want to understand where on the spectrum, how do I know when to use one or the other? And I think that's where we can provide some guidance, because I think companies want to say, hey, Jonathan, you're seeing companies use this. Hey, Fran, hey, Ruben, you're seeing companies use this. What do you recommend? That's what they really want to know. They don't want to jump into the details until they really understand, how is this going to help me, and when do I decide to use this rather than, REST or SOAP or GraphQL or anything else.
Yep.
Actually, I identified like a few different groups of people with different knowledge. Like people come in for the first time to event-driven architectures, and they don't know anything about it. So this is the message there should be like you were saying. So here, look, you have other ways of doing the same things you've been doing right now. Like instead of using REST APIs, you can use event-driven APIs. Same things or for different things, right? In a match real-time way or whatever you want to sell there, right? But you have to be speaking in this case about event-driven. You should be evangelizing event-driven, and not so much AsyncAPI. So then you have the other group of people that I've seen is they know little about the event-driven. They don't know much. They probably use it for some things, but yeah, they don't, and they don't know anything about OpenAPI, for instance, or Swagger, and then you have to convince them, or you have to not convince, but you have to persuade them to understand that defining the interactions is actually something good. Either OpenAPI or AsyncAPI is actually something good because you have lots of benefits, right? And then you have the other group, which is people coming from OpenAPI and Swagger, and not necessarily knowing a lot about event-driven, but they at least they know the benefits of using a specification, right? They just need to know how to use AsyncAPI. This is what I identified. Then you have other people like. But that's more into the detail of everyone, if they know JSON schema or not, but that's too much low-level detail. So probably we should adapt our speech, let's say, like instead of focusing so much on AsyncAPI, we should be focusing on event-driven architectures. And then as a side note, hey, here's AsyncAPI, right? But just as a tool, as another thing. Because when you try to evangelize AsyncAPI, people might not understand or fully understand what you're talking about because they lack the base knowledge, right? So yeah. No, this is something definitely interesting. And this is something also that Rubén told me the other day. This probably should be also tackled on the website, on the homepage. Like when you land on the homepage, this is like, the copy is this and nothing is the same, right? So So probably we need to make it clear on the website as well, like, hey, so here's the value proposition, right? But other than that, you have event-driven architectures that you might have heard of or not. But here's what we're suggesting. We are not inventors of the event-driven architectures, right? We just promote a new kind of tools or a new way of developing this kind of applications, right, or architectures. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And something that has been bothering me during the last months is the onboarding experience for people who wants to collaborate. It's hard. It's hard to because we are in this stage, as Jonathan said, that we're not yet on version 2, but we have nothing yet. Just the specification. It's not even done. It's release candidate, right?
So are you gonna, by the way, on that topic of release candidate, are you gonna change, right? Because obviously right now you go versions and you got a bunch of versions and you have next. Are you gonna like here fairly imminently rename that RC-2.0.0 or something?
Yes. So that's next right now means just next version. I was thinking on renaming this next version to 2.0.0 RC1, but I didn't want to lose so much time on replacing links everywhere.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, let's leave it as next, but right now next and 2.0.0 release candidate 1 are the same thing right now.
Yeah.
So,
well, yeah, I know that. I think though people don't know that yet, right? So like I just did what we call, it's basically an internal enablement session last week with Solace on sort of where we're going on different things, and AsyncAPI is a big piece of that. And so because of that, I ended up getting bombarded with like a whole host of AsyncAPI questions, including like, hey, this, like, there's like a Git, like basically some people went through your Git repos, and some of which haven't been updated for like years. So I'm like getting questions on dot delimiters and like all sorts of stuff. So I'm trying to divert everyone to just look at next, right? But I'm imagining that if that's happening with us, it's probably happening with everybody, where people aren't even finding next as like what they should be reviewing or looking at, right? It feels too, for it being out for a release candidate and being out for review, it's too hard, I think, for people to find right now. That would be my feedback.
Yeah. Actually, I agree with that. That's why I'm working on the documentation right now, on the getting stuff guides and also tweaking the website. So there's a design studio building the new website, the new homepage, right? So, but it's just design. We need to sit together probably someday and work on the copy for the website, because honestly, there are two major issues for me. One is I'm not native, and secondly, I am the creator of this, so I might be biased or assuming people know things that are really not in their minds or in their knowledge. So if you could help me with that, like help me with the homepage copy, that would be amazing.
Well, what I'm wondering on that is, maybe what would be interesting is, at a minimum, you, me, and Emmelyn have like a meeting on that. Like I'm of course come from the super biased of like, I've lived in the asynchronous event-driven world like my whole career, and I think Emmelyn brings like this is the API world. How does it relate? And so the meeting in the middle, I think, could result in pretty good copy, I would think. And then I think the other thing that would be good to do is figure out a way, like in your GitHub repo for AsyncAPI, like how do we, nothing in GitHub's ever dead. I get that, right? But like, how do we keep people from going to like topic-definition, right? Something that hasn't been updated since 2017, right? Like that content's probably not going to be kept up to date, right? Like, I don't know what we do about that, because that was an area that I got a bunch of feedback on, actually. Some of it actually positive feedback, which needs to now find its way into the 2.0.0 documentation of, like, hey, what is a good common practice for, channel naming, which is called topic naming down there, right? But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there just needs to be sort of just a housekeeping, like, how do we make sure that we're directing people to where they should be?
Yeah.
Because right now there's a lot of places you could go.
You're right.
Yeah.
And actually,
it's content life cycle.
Yeah. Regarding this topic definition repo, it's not the first time that causes problems, like, to me. And actually, in the web, but this has been like a to-do there, in the list. and this is actually not part of AsyncAPI, right?
No, I know.
Yeah.
I know, but I've had, in the last 24 hours, 2 emails on that exact topic where I'm going, interesting content in here, but don't look at it, right? Like, go on to the next.
Yeah.
So this is something that I created for a previous company that I was working at, where AsyncAPI originated, right? And then I left it there thinking, okay, this might be of the interest of someone, right? When in the early days of AsyncAPI, right? And now it's like, oh, crap, no, how can I explain that this is not AsyncAPI specification? You can use AsyncAPI without sticking to this topic definition or topic naming, right?
Right.
But yeah, so probably we should just move this out,
Okay.
and then probably in the future suggest it as a recommendation, or
well, I think it's either documentation, or at a minimum, it's a good blog post, right, on, like, best practices of using, of channel naming, right? Like,
Yeah, put it on D-Zone.
right. Yeah, but, like, to have a repo of it, I think is causing some confusion. So, and then the fact that, again, it's got dots. So, like, people, of course, from us all, since we use / anyway, they're like, you got to get Fran to update it to /. I'm like, well, that's already the URL specification in 2.0. So just check out 2.0 and let me know what you think, right? So, so I think just little stuff like that will go a long way, I think, for the onboarding community stuff.
Yeah, and then since I'll be talking about event-driven architecture and I have experts on the line, I'd like to put together a slide, and it has Solace on there as well, recognize your contribution. I want to make sure that what I'm saying is the right messaging, and we can use these public forums as a way to test, if you will, the copy on the website, right? Because it's a living, breathing thing, and I think if I test it out in the wild and bring some more feedback to this group and say, hey, here are the questions that I got, based on what I showed, and adjust accordingly. So if I can kind of get that from you guys, that would be great, right? Because then I'm driving traffic back to us and saying, hey, if you want to contribute, here's where we are, here's what you can do.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense.
No, obviously, well, ping us whenever you need something, and send us whatever material you want us to review.
Okay.
I'm happy to review it, and I told you many times, like, whenever you need something, I'm not just being not trying to be nice. I'm talking seriously. Whenever you need something, just let me know. I'm happy to help.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah, we know you're not nice, Fran, so thanks for clarifying that. But yeah, so the other thing too, Emmelyn, is maybe offline we should just set up a meeting, like you, me, and maybe Mark, since Mark's our developer advocate too, around, maybe some things we could just do together to make sure we have a crisp message in the field about sort of our value proposition, your value proposition, AsyncAPI, and how all this kind of fits together, so that we don't also just confuse the market as well. I think that could be good. So
okay, sure.
So yeah, maybe I'll send you a meeting invite or something, and we can just chat that out.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I want to make sure I'm a good, rep. I want to make sure that what I'm saying resonates and makes sense as well.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense.
Something for me, just like some repos permissions or something. I mean, just whatever stupid thing is, just let me know, because sometimes, I lose track who has access to what, right? And if you need to set, to change something on the website or in the repo, just let me know, okay?
Sounds good.
Cool. So I think, from my side, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about, which is not so much about the work I did. That's because it was, for me, it was sounding like a pitch every 2 weeks, and it was like these people are going to get bored of me pitching every 2 weeks. So yeah, that's just in short, in other words, I want this to be a group effort, and I want you to be part of it, like I am, not less or not like collaborators, like just you're the AsyncAPI, you're part of the AsyncAPI group, right? And what do you need in order to help, right? Because it drives me crazy trying to imagine what's missing for some people, right? And because I don't get so much feedback as well, when someone is stuck with something, I don't get anyone to tell me, hey, I've been looking at this, but I don't understand it. Or it took me like 2 days to find the right place to read this, whatever. Nobody tells me anything about it, right? And I see some people wanting to collaborate, but immediately they just stop to trying to collaborate because they just can't find the way to do it, right?
It's like friction. Basically, we've got a friction log.
Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Yeah, it's friction. That it seems to be a lot of friction. I understand that there is a lot of friction, and it's going to be solved in the next months because we're working on that. But I want to identify what are the first things to solve in order to have other people collaborating, right? Before we focus on the end user, I would like to focus on how to help collaborators, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so, and not so much about the end user, to be honest, right now. I think it's too early, especially we don't have version 2. It's good to focus on that as well, but my focus, specifically mine, I think it's to help you get up to speed and collaborate better. And so whatever you find, just let me know. You can do it. You can say it on privately or in the general channel or whatever. I don't mind sharing it publicly. And yeah, just sometimes just leaving a message like, hey, I just struggle to do this or that, initiates a conversation on the general channel, like, hey, some other people, hey, yeah, same happened to me or whatever, right? And they don't feel alone, right? Like they are the only ones feeling this friction. So yeah.
And then at some point after the launch of 2, did you already set the expectation for deprecation of 1, and then how, if people have integrated with 1, to then rebuild on 2? Like, for example, like Slack, right, already uses 1 actively.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've been thinking is, we didn't, or I didn't think in that yet, but we're gonna keep building on version 2, building everything in version 2 as if it were the first one, not the first one, the only version that we have, right? And that means like you said, for instance, for Slack, that we will have to provide some migration scripts probably, so people can just run a migration script and they get their version 1 definition transformed to version 2. It shouldn't be hard. Actually, there are a few changes to do. And actually, the folks from SAP, they will have to do it. So probably I can talk to them to look at, and they can work on that migration script because they need it for their product. So yeah, and then deprecating version 1. I don't think it should be alive for more than a year. I will say, because that's gonna create a lot of work, maintaining the existing tooling. And
well, that was going to be my question: is what's the definition deprecated? Because like if we're not already maintaining, well, like I thought at least we weren't really maintaining them. It kind of already is deprecated when 2 comes out, right?
Exactly. It's kind of, but I mean, tooling, yes, tooling is easy because if you offer some backward compatibility, this is fine. But migrating your whole document, like if you have a huge document or many huge documents of AsyncAPI definitions, you don't want to be rewriting those documents, right?
Right. But I think you should then put a line in the sand and go, okay, like we're going to call 1 deprecated when we have the scripts available to port you out of 1, right?
Exactly. So one thing is setting the deprecation notice, which will happen as soon as we have this script. And the second will be, immediately it will be like tooling will not support version 1.
Right.
It's just to prevent having to work with this overhead, right? We're not OpenAPI, so our adoption is not yet so wide. So we can do that. We can just replace one version with another, and almost nobody will get impact. So,
so what is the target date for the 2.0 release?
So the release of 2.0 is gonna happen now during London Gartner AADI. This is I'm trying to close this date for version 2, but because it all depends on the state of the tooling and documentation and all that. Depending on how we are, my announcement will change. Yeah. Right? Instead of announcing version 2, I might announce version 2 beta or something like that. Right?
Right.
So
yeah, and we can obviously work all through that. I think do you feel like the success criteria for calling it version 2 is the spec and the parser, or what is your success criteria for a version 2?
Version 2 will be the spec, the parser, and the generator. That's a documentation generator and code generator, at least, but with what we have right now. So
yeah. See, I mean, it's obvious. I don't think the code generator definitely needs to be tied to it. I think they're going to have a separate release life cycle on their own. I could understand the document generator and the parser needing to be in lockstep.
Well, let me put it in another way. Like, because the generator is a single package which generates documentation and code. That's why I was bundling them both, right? But it will really be the specification, the parser, and then the documentation generator, and for sure, also the editor, the online editor, so people can get there and try quickly without having to set up anything, right? But the editor is really easy to hack right now. It's just once we have the parser for version 2, it will be just a matter of 1 day to migrate the editor and also and also the other templates, the documentation templates. So yeah, most of the work is going to happen around the parser right now, and then it will be a matter of a week or so to migrate the rest of the tools.
Okay.
So yeah, that's my definition of success criteria. But you know, we don't need to have all the features of version 2 supported on the tooling from day one. We don't need to have all the features on or many languages for code generation, or multiple schemas like protobuf or Avro. I think this is something that will come slowly over time, but we can launch in a much simpler way, right? Like, let's say, launching the same that we have right now, but with respect to, right? That's it. So that's what I will, and that's what I will launch as version 2, and then we keep working on improving things. But yeah, the announcement is all going to depend on the state of the tooling. I mean, the minimum tooling, let's say. Hopefully we get there with a great announcement. And also it's going to depend, because I would like to get feedback from people using version 2 on real environments, real use cases, and see if it adapts well, right? And or if we should change something or add something, or right, before we close the definitive version 2.
And do you have identified a pilot user?
Sorry, say again.
Do you have any identified kind of pilot users that you get feedback from?
Yes, the reason I'm writing this Getting Started guide is to have this initial documentation on how to use version 2, so that I can then start sending emails to some people, companies, to pilot it, basically. One of them being you, by the way. So yeah, I have a huge list actually, and I wanted to send this email before, but I understood documentation is not yet ready for people to really review it thoughtfully, right?
I'll work on it.
No, I mean, I have to. I think it's my job right now to work on this initial set of articles, and then if these articles, because you told me that you're new to event-driven APIs and to AsyncAPI as well, right? So if I can make, with these articles, if I can make you learn AsyncAPI, that will be a success. Because then you will be able to understand how it works, and then you can write more documentation, right? But that's why I was thinking, okay, then I still focus on helping you, right? Not in helping the end user. I still focus on helping the working group, right? So you better understand how things work in version 2, and then you can expand from there on, right? Otherwise, it's going to be always tied to what I have time to do, right? And that's not so much of what we do. So yes, yeah. Cool. Anything else you want to mention, discuss? So we have. Okay.
Yeah, I was just asking if anyone took our project to the open source season of docs. If not, if it's okay with the group, I'd like to propose that that we apply for that, or apply for the program on behalf of this group.
What is it about?
It's basically connecting additional doc contributors with open source projects like ours.
Uh-huh.
So in general, tech writers and mentors all over the world are trying to connect to open source projects. And so they're trying to make onboarding easier for that group of talent. Tech writers are kind of always left behind. And so I think what Google is trying to do is to show them, hey, you know, open source projects need your help and your expertise. And so it's the application's open now till the 23rd, and I'd love to apply for us and be the mentor for our open source project, if that's okay.
Obviously, yeah, go for it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Sounds good. Cool. I will have a look at the things you sent me, Emmelyn.
Okay. The other thing I was going to mention is, so Amazon has a pre-built library of artifacts to create architecture, and I was wondering if we have something like this for event-driven architecture. Basically, it's like a common way of communicating architecture. I can grab the link. It's kind of like a quick way to do it. Is this familiar to anyone?
No.
Hold on, let me grab this. Does it make sense? So it's like you get.
So it's like a document to describe your architecture, and then you upload it, and it creates and connects all these machines together or something?
Yeah, it's basically that way. It looks the same whenever here it is. Okay. The reason I mentioned this is it's a way to communicate design, deployment, and topology. And
yeah. Okay, so it's about diagrams, you mean?
Yeah, it's just about communicating architecture. And the reason I mentioned this is it's another idea, you know, that I have where since we're talking about event-driven architecture, typically it's not depicted the same way. And
but that looks like a very AWS focus, right?
It's very AWS focused,
Okay.
but the idea I had is maybe someday we can have it for event-driven architecture that's not company specific.
Yeah, I used to use something on New Relic, and for OmniGraffle, and there is a stencil for OmniGraffle. I'll find it and share.
Okay, thanks.
And I was actually improving it while at New Relic, adding more stuff that was not in this stencil, but I don't think I can get this back. So probably, and now not even Rubén works there, so already, so too late. Yeah, we used to work together at New Relic. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, we can start with this OmniGraffle stencil, but the thing about that is that for event-driven architectures, there's really nothing mysterious. Let's say everything is the same except let's say the broker. You have a broker, but the rest of the things are the same. Are just pieces of software, let's say, or processes or services in microservices, whatever you want to call it, right? Other than that, everything is the same. Other than the broker, everything is the same. Cool. So that's been good. I like this new style of meetings where I don't speak so much. Well, thanks for sharing and for joining. I'm gonna stop recording.